Cool.
Yeah.
And
All right, we're getting started with Dain. Yeah.
hi, everybody. Hi. So my name's Dain Saint. I run a game company called Cybercrime Studios. We make video games. Been doing it for about 10 years. We used to be at a spot we ran called the Philly Game Forge around the corner. Then we stopped doing that, and now we're here. So that's my business partner over there in the gold shoes. You make video games also with me. So this is kind of a weird talk because it's a little bit abstract and it's less of a talk and more of a discussion. I want questions. It's gonna get a little weird, so just like prepare yourselves for like a kind of abstract talk. So in making video games, I play a lot at the sort of boundary between things that are real and things that are virtual, things that are imaginary. And a few years ago, I was struggling to sort of square that circle to figure out properties of objects that share both real and imaginary things. And in that process, I came up with this framework I call complex objects. And this is, for me, it sort of fundamentally changed the way I look at the world. It fundamentally changed the way that I solve problems and the way that I understand what understanding is. I've been struggling for the past couple of years to get that concept across to other people in a way that is usable. And so what I'm hoping to do today with Show and Tell is every time I have to explain it to somebody and every time somebody asks me questions about it, I get a clearer understanding of how to explain it to other people. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for today. So complex objects are comprised of a real part and an imaginary part. Is anybody familiar with, like, who's got math here? Anybody got good math? No? Yeah. Okay, so that's a concept from mathematics where numbers can be comprised of a real number and an imaginary number. When you put them together, you get a complex number. But the most important thing about it is that all numbers are complex numbers. Similarly, all objects are complex objects. And what I mean by that is, I guess I have to define some things. Object. When I say object, I'm talking about anything that you would refer to with a noun. So that can be a table, that can be a chair, that can be a person, but that's also time. That's also direction. That's also a country. These are things that we have sort of drawn boxes around so that we can understand them a bit better. There is the thing that you observe, and that's what I consider to be real. And then there's the story that you tell about the thing that you observe, which is what I consider to be imaginary. And when you put those two things together, you end up with what we consider to be a thought. Now, the cool thing about this is that you can change those things directly. Complex objects are the things that understanding is made out of. And what I'm going to bring up a quick video here to illustrate that. Hopefully this plays. That's the wrong talk.
An untold story, really.
So,
Great, right? Have a listen again. Shadow dims the appearance of the surface so that we see B as lighter than it really is.
So listen to this here.
Here's one more example, which shows just how quickly the brain can use new predictions to change what we consciously experience. Right? Have a listen to this. Sounded strange, right? Have a listen again and see if you can get anything. Still strange. Now listen to this.
I think breakfast is a really terrible idea.
Which I do. So you heard some words there, right? Now listen to the first sound again. I'm just going to replay it.
I think breakfast is a really terrible idea.
Yeah? So you can now hear words there. Once more for luck.
I think breakfast is a really terrible idea.
So what this is showing is that you have the actual thing you're observing, which is sound that's coming into your head. but you don't have a framework for it. It doesn't make any sense. There's no story attached to it. It's not real. And the second we give you a story, the actual words, I think Brexit is a really terrible idea. Now you have something to attach to it. The actual observed thing hasn't changed at all. The only thing that's changed is your the story that you're telling about it. And that's messing with the building blocks of how you understand directly. So complex objects are what we observe plus the stories we tell about them. Where am I with this? So we understand, for instance, dyslexia as this idea that when somebody's trying to read, the letters flip back and forth. They don't understand them. They can't make heads or tails of it. Especially letters that look particularly similar, right? For instance, let's look at this P, B, D, and Q. They're very similar looking letters, but they are just in different orientations. And most people can read that fine. But if you suffer from dyslexia, then those letters are going to keep flipping back and forth, and it's going to give you a hard time understanding. We categorize that as a disability. We say, oh, there's something wrong with your brain that makes it so that you are unable to understand this thing that you are observing. But if we take a look at what the complex object here is, what is being observed are these shapes. And then the story is happening inside that person's mind, the story of what these shapes mean. Now, for most of us, we are able to look at that and say, well, one of this is a P, a B, a D, and a Q. They're separate things, they're different, right? But in the brain of somebody with dyslexia, they're not being seen as different things. And I actually had this printed this morning, if you want to pass that around. The shape is being collated as a three-dimensional object. It's not two-dimensional for somebody with dyslexia. And so when we look at that, we're seeing something that is not a disability, but an ability. The ability to take a two-dimensional glyph and translate it into a three-dimensional object. That's how their brain understands the letter, right? And so from there, it becomes very clear that this isn't a disability. This is the ability to extrapolate from incomplete data. And once you see that, well, the way that we are treating dyslexia, the way that we're treating people with dyslexia is completely wrong. We're treating it as something that they can't do rather than something that they can. That every person that I've spoken to over the last 10 years that is dyslexic has incredibly high 3D spatial reasoning skills. And that's something that would be incredibly important in building virtual reality, building augmented reality experiences. And it's about 11 to 20% of Americans that live with some form of dyslexia, and these are people that are going to be cut out of career opportunities because we don't think they can read. We're solving the wrong problems. And so by forcing ourselves to pay attention to the story that is being told about what's observed, we're forcing ourselves to use empathy first to solve problems rather than solving things in purely cold and scientific manner. So yeah, I don't feel like I have landed with this. So what I want to do for the next, how much time do I have?
Got about 7 minutes with the question.
7 minutes. So what I'd like is for people to ask questions, and hopefully I can answer them a bit better than what I've sort of put together here. I know it's very abstract.
How do you use this? How would it be useful?
Oh, and can you repeat the question for the microphone?
Right.
Continue, sorry.
Yeah. How would you use this concept for business or other?
So the way that the question is, how would you use the concept of complex objects to solve problems in business or whatnot? The point of it is to make sure that you're solving the right problem. So by using this lens, you're able to look at something, for instance, like dyslexia, where we had previous observation and story that it was the writing is the ground truth and what's being observed is an anomaly. By paying attention to, and drawing the box correctly between the brain and the written word, you're able to see, oh, we're solving the wrong problem. And that gives you more insight in how to approach these things properly.
You're saying people should ask when they see an abstract concept, what's the story behind it? And that will lead to
I lost it. What I'm saying is that the stories we tell about the things we observe are as important, if not more important, than the things that we're observing themselves. That's the point of it. The story is real for us. And so if we don't understand what stories people are telling about what they're observing, then we don't understand what they're seeing. We don't understand half of their reality, and we can't solve the right problems. Yeah.
You touched on the dyslexia as an ability. I like the term neurodiversity.
Yeah.
Differently able. So Monday morning, I was going to talk. Damon John founded Fubu.
Okay.
Yeah. A shark. I don't know if any of you were there, but Monday morning, Chamber of Commerce had a thing. He was there. He was dyslexic. And he asked you, said, raise your hand, how many people here are dyslexic? Very few people raised their hand. Mm-hmm. And then he mentioned how 8 of the 12 people that have ever been sharks on the Shark Tank, 8 of the 12 are dyslexic.
Right.
It's like, now how many people want to raise their hand? So it seems like there's some ability, maybe it's in the problem solving in different angles.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of interesting, at least anecdotal thing.
Yeah. Does anybody here have like a impossible time telling their right from their left? Does anybody know?
I do this all the time. Yeah, I do this
like sometimes,
all the
but
time.
I'm just like completely lost in intuitive sense for that. I've met a few people like that through my life that just cannot tell right from left at all. And in each one of those cases, what I ask them is, well, did you play sports? And usually they play some sort of sport. They play basketball or baseball or something like that. And I say, okay, well, what hand do you pitch with? What hand do you throw with? And they don't know. And the reason they don't know is because it turns out most people that can't tell their right from their left are ambidextrous. Most people learn their right and their left because they have a dominant hand and a non-dominant hand, and they assign the right label to one and the left label to the other one. But if you're ambidextrous, you don't have that internal mechanism, and they go through life thinking that they're dumb, they're messed something up, when in fact there's an ability that's been untapped. And that's because we don't understand the way their brain is processing the world. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
What do you think this framework can do for mitigating conflicts online in social spaces when context is very important to a message, but someone lacking that context wouldn't know how to parse the original intent of the message?
Well, I mean, a lot of our online interactions are held back because we don't consider them because we don't think that they're real, we don't give them any weight. And it's interesting. There's a thing that I talk about a lot called the second age of magic, this idea that we're currently living in a time where it's never been easier for human thought to become reality. The thing that I just passed around, that letter, that was an idea I had yesterday morning, and I didn't know how to 3D print. And 2 hours later, I had gone through enough stuff on Google and used that machine to turn something that was in my head into reality, and that's never been true in human history. So something like this, where like the old sort of magical thought was like, oh, if I know your real name, I can put a hex on you and destroy your life. And we do the same thing now, but we don't call it hexing, we call it doxing. I can go online and summon an army of trolls to ruin your life. Like, this is the language that we're using about the reality that we're in. But because we don't think that those online reactions are real, they don't have weight, things like Twitter's acceptable use policy don't get enough scrutiny. The way that Facebook takes a look at our time don't get enough scrutiny because we aren't giving it enough weight. We aren't treating it as a real thing. And so a lot of these online discussions that we have, the way that they get heated, we're still putting them as a separate thing than what we're doing right now, this discussion that we're having. And so putting this framework out and understanding that those things are just as real, if not more so, than the ones that we interact with in our day-to-day lives, gives us just a different way of attacking those problems, a different way of handling abusive behavior, a different way of mitigating misunderstanding. And again, using empathy first problem solving to fix those conversations. Yeah.
Are you familiar at all with the psychological concept of cognitive reframing?
I'm sorry?
Cognitive reframing.
So
it's a common tactic used for people with depression and anxiety that takes a situation and you reframe your thought process. You essentially frame the story.
Right.
It's to help people whose automatic thoughts are biased towards negative situations for whatever reason, through growth or the past, and helps them show that there's more than one story behind every situation. And it's I like the way that it relates to what you're talking about, because it shows that there's kind of a spatial awareness to even ideas and feelings. So, if something bad happens to somebody, or they feel like it's a bad situation, they're taught to try to be aware when the feeling comes up and to reframe the situation into how can this go in good way? What story is making the situation positive? And that helps a lot of people grow and overcome personal adversity. And I think what you're trying to do here in the concept you're talking about fit really well with that from psychology and can move into the physical, because the main point here is that everything's fluid. We have real objects from the ground, and those go for ideas as well. But those real ideas have infinite amount of perspectives behind them, imaginary content, and the way we communicate in faster than that. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get at with the idea of complex objects, and the idea that they are the building blocks of understanding. Like, making an observation and telling a story about it is what understanding means. That's what understanding is for a conscious being with a neural network. And there's no way for us to get around that. Even with science, using the scientific method, the first two steps are make an observation, form a hypothesis. Science is just a framework for making sure that people who make the same observations tell the same story. But that's what understanding means. And understanding that there is a sort of metaphysical object that you create when you understand something that you can directly change, how you understand things, and you can pick up on systems faster. You can solve problems with more clarity. And yeah, a lot of it comes down to gaining this sort of ability of cognitive reframing, like you're talking about, gaining the ability of empathy, which is just being able to tell somebody else's story, even if you don't sympathize with it.
Yeah, I've studied stories in quick bit. Yeah, it's my belief that how we communicate is actually everything that we communicate is storytelling.
Yeah,
because that's the basis of understanding. Wow. And well, what stories we tell, of course, is what shapes the reality that we have. So I think this is a really good stuff it's because it's so abstract, it's tough to understand, but
it's kind of hard to get across it.
The more people can learn about what story is,
yeah,
and how to what the building blocks of that are, and understanding is I think really essential to not just personal growth, but societal growth.
Thanks.
So that's about all the time we have, but Dain is here and wonderful to talk to. So, so if you have more thoughts or questions about that,
yeah, the more questions that you ask, the easier this gets for me. And I really need that. Like, I really need to go through this process of just trying to explain this very, very abstract thing in a way that is accessible. I sit right there behind that yellow bookshelf, I guess it is, most of the time. And other than that, I'm on Slack, just Dain Saint. So yeah, thanks, guys. See you.
right. since we just talked about storytelling, Cathy, do you want to go next?
I can do that. I have to use the community laptop.
That's my laptop. All right.
I was just saying, I'm so used to it. I do a presentation. And Adam said, if you need anything, send me your slides. So I sent him the slides, never thinking that I should be, this is not in real time.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, this is slight
Okay,
delay.
you don't want to use that as a mirror.
No.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
There it is. Are we in Zoom?
We are presently in Zoom.
Oh, brother, Mike.
No.
No, I just pressed. Just here, but I didn't do that.
You just click that. Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can stay over there, Cathy.
Oh, okay. I'll go there. Okay. Well, I just managed to get rid of it. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, I'm going to talk about storytelling. This was still as an answer to a previous presentation, but it's actually the way I've been looking at stories. I've just put out a book on Kindle called Grow Your Business. I named my own book, Grow Your Business One Story at a Time. I have a different take on storytelling than most people out there. Most people out there are going to say, okay, here's the structure of stories, the arc of the story, the hero's journey story. And my take is to say storytelling for business, for marketing, means you identify what your purpose is, what you're trying to accomplish in marketing, and then use storytelling as a tool to do that. And I've been talking about this for some time. So the first question is, what kind of story supports your marketing? And I'm going to start with, oops, what did I just do? This, the Cinderella story is a story that does not support marketing. A lot of people who write about stories will say, go look at a fairy tale or go look at a movie and learn from that. And I'm saying probably not, because the Cinderella story does not make a good marketing story. In fact, I like to say it makes a great movie, but a lousy marketing story. If you remember, does everyone remember? I had to go back and look it up. You had this orphan girl with a cruel stepsisters and a cruel stepmother, evil stepmother. She was forced to do housework and sit by the fire. And she met a challenge. There was a ball at the palace, right? And the fairy godmother came in out of the blue and set her up and gave her a warning, got to be home by midnight. She left her shoe behind and the rest to get out the door. And her moment of triumph was the prince found the slipper. The court, you guys all know this. I had to go look it up. It was so long. So long ago. The courtiers visit all the young women, and of course, nobody, needless to say, we did not have shoes that were manufactured. There was only one person with this size foot, not like a 7.5 medium, and it fit her perfectly. And she and the prince lived happily ever after. So why is this a good story? Well, you probably, it holds interest. If you've never heard it before, you might have some suspense. And what we identify a lot of times with ugly duckling syndrome, that the person who's left by the fire while the cool kids get to go to the ball. But why is it bad for marketing? Does anyone have a suggestion about why it might be bad for marketing? I'll give away the show.
Doesn't drive you to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. The hero doesn't achieve the solution. It's sort of like by magic. Magic happens. And I won't go into a detail, but I created a business story that might be like that, where you imagine that someone is trying to get a business going, and then someone shows up out of the blue while he's sitting in the bar and says, I can help you. And then by magic, he was dressed in an Armani suit, he's in a limo, and he goes to this presentation, and suddenly everything, if you want to, you can get the slides, that you have to share them. And all of a sudden the words flowed, and at the end of it, they said, okay, but he left behind one report. The next day, you get the idea. And this is not a good story, because it doesn't really show anything about how you, as the marketer, will be helping your clients. So it's a good movie idea. You heard it here. If you want to make a movie, it's my idea. But it's a bad marketing story. So the structure of a marketing story is different. You replace the beginning. You start in the middle. In the middle, if someone uses the phrase "the middle of the battle," you don't go way back. You start with a problem. But I like to say that if you work, most of my My clients work with clients, their services. So the story starts when your client comes to you. And usually if you have a service business and you have clients, they call you up and say, what? I have a problem, right? That's the beginning of the story. And then there's usually a crisis going on. People rarely hire someone when things are going well. And then there's your action. And then there are outcomes, not happily ever after ending, but outcomes. So the action really shows how you, the marketer, help create the outcome, and it's a transformation, but not magical. So I actually have identified 7 types of stories. You can read about them in my book, other places or online, but I'm just going to talk about 3 of them that I reckon that I have identified that you can use in marketing. And am I going to talk to Cathy? This is bright. Okay, we've got to get down to time. Okay, the classic. So we're going to look at 3 types of stories, and your challenge as a marketer is to say, this is my marketing goal. You start with the purpose, and then you find the story, or you use a story. And I recommend having a portfolio of stories, not your story. My next book, my next big topic, my next course is, what do you say when someone asks you what's your story? Can people resonate to that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I would love feedback. So the first story is the classic marketing story. And there are some people some marketing coaches will tell you, you must have a story like this. You must have a story about how you struggle and you solve the problem, or people are not going to believe you. And that, the classic, the person is in distress, the hero or protagonist in distress, you have a challenge and a struggle, and then they reach success. I mean, this is like, I've actually heard someone say, 5 years ago, I was sleeping on a mattress in a church basement until I figured out how to build my business, or I tried a dozen diets, I couldn't get a job. These are heartrending stories when you hear them the first time. But after a while, they get kind of old. They create likability in some circumstances. By the way, there is a thing about if you're ever told to be vulnerable, there's a catch, because research shows that you're more likable when you make a mistake if you're already successful or on a higher status than your listeners. You've heard, otherwise, you're actually hurting yourself. So all these marketing coaches who are begging people to be vulnerable, and are often missing the boat unless you're wildly successful. They can create empathy. They're effective when they're completely credible and they relate absolutely to your target market. So for example, if someone is a grief counselor or a life coach who works with people who are divorced, or then they can say, here's, I've been through that, and you can empathize. I can empathize with you. Or there's a woman who's really sharp, who's a blogging coach, and she was going broke until she figured out how to blog. So and she tells that story. So that can be effective. But I like to say, what if, you're a cardiologist? People don't care if you had a heart attack, so it's not going to work. And sometimes your hard luck story is not going to be related to your business. It's got to be definitely related. Some of us do not have hard luck stories. Some people have what are called silver spoon stories, where they never struggled. And it can suggest you're incompetent. If that happens, and if it's not dramatic, it's got to be really dramatic to hold people's interest. So those are what I call the hard luck stories. In my book, I call them journey stories. And most people are told to tell that. But the most important story you need for your portfolio is a success story. Or actually, when I work with clients, I tell them I want 3 success stories. How you help the client conquer his or her toughest challenge. And if you've been in business at all, you probably have a few stories like that. Right? So for example, Mary came to me. She tried and failed at 3 diets. Or Todd called me when his wife threatened to divorce him if he didn't stop working so hard at his business. Those are things where, what am I doing here? This is not advancing. What am I doing wrong? It's not advancing.
There it is.
Oh, it is?
I think it's just lagging.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I may have had too many spaces on my PowerPoint too. You can, success stories are used anywhere. You can use them when you, and in fact, if you're looking at a way to explain what you do, if you can come up with a story of how this helped someone solve a problem, that would be ideal for you. For anyone, in fact, everyone should have some story as an example. This is becoming more important because what I would say often is that most of us are working in careers and in businesses that didn't exist 10 years ago. And so we really need to show this, to explain. They serve as social proof, which is critical. They show that you help other people can relate. They enhance your trust factor. Biggest caution is you've got to make your client look good. If you're telling a story like, I actually have seen this where, oh, this person was so slow. If you make your client sound like an idiot, it's going to backfire because people don't relate to idiots. The concept story is another one you might want to look at. This helps you explain a concept, a complex idea, and make a point, like the moral is. I'm going to just give you a very brief idea because you can look this up. Here we go. This is like the one from Bula, who is over there hiding. If he were to explain his face, he could use a story like this. So we wondered how many whole. Oh, oops! I went too far. Oh, anyway, someone was looking for a place to hold a birthday party, and they didn't want to spend money on a hotel. They didn't want to do this, so they happened to run across a church that had an extra room, so they rented that. And then they wondered how many halls like this are unused, well connected in the tech world, so we decided to make an app. You get it. You know what it's about immediately. It would be better if they had more detail. Another type of comparison stories, which the Q&A, if you want me to tell these, they're in my book, they're other online. I have them free in places on my blog. But like the Wall Street Journal story, 2 managers began working the same day, and one did great, one ended up in the mailroom. That's a concept story. A fisherman in a village story, if you want, that's a good one. If you want to ask me the Q&A, the 2 guys walk into a bar. So anyway, the bottom line is, so when sharing, you want to create an aha moment and make sure I've got examples of misfires that I can share. So the bottom line is, replace what's your story. When someone asks you what's your story, the question should be why this story? Why do you need this story to make your point? And I've got I can give you I have placed these in an Amazon S3 account where you can download them with public access. I'll give you the link if you like, and a shortened link. And if you want, this is one of my favorite. This is absolutely free. This is on a mailing list, but I can get you one off the mailing list. mycopy.info/ there's 17 ways to use stories to grow your business. So that's the presentation. I think I'm good. We have, yeah, okay. This is really, the idea is to give you an idea of what there is. And you could, if you're interested in something, you can ask. So we have 5 minutes for questions, and I am all over the internet. I am impossible not to find. You have a question?
Oh, sorry.
Anyone have a question? Yeah, I got everyone cold. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so do you find that there's a connection between how marketing works and the ideology of that particular culture? Like, are these mostly like American marketing ideas, and do you know of any changes with like you know what I mean, like a culture that maybe less optimistic or less, you know what I mean, like the way that different cultures have different stories?
They would just have different stories.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I say when we went live quickly is you have to adapt your story to your audience.
Right.
So for example, even within the US, if you're in your own client base, I mean, there are stories that you would tell. That's why I say have a portfolio and don't just have one story. So if you're speaking to an audience of, I don't know, very uptight people who are, but I don't know if they're already left anymore. But then you have one story, and there are stories you would, So you definitely adapt to your audience, to your target market, and to your purpose too. Because you might have a story that you want to tell. Your purpose might be to get people to sign up for something, or your purpose might be to build a brand. Your purpose might be to actually grow. There are internal stories you tell too, to plan your business. So you would have different stories, and you tell them differently. That's why I think my approach is somewhat different, because it's very strategic. You start with a strategy, and then you go to the story. Whereas most of the books on stories just talk about the story, and they don't really get into the strategy.
Having the story type down is one thing. How important do you think it is that you convey your voice as opposed to the voice that you think your audience wants to hear?
It's a good question. I don't think voice is as, I used to think voice was important. I actually I'm so embarrassed, I wrote blog posts on how important it was to find your voice. But actually, when people are telling a story, a lot of times your own voice is less important than the concept and how you relate it. So when you're telling a story, what you can actually do is go into character. So if you're telling a story like the 2 guys went into the bar, you could put on, you guys do, some of you guys do the improv, you could do that. You become the guys who walk into the bar, you pick up their dialogue. Dialogue is very powerful. I think that when people want to hear the message, and they, without trying, your voice will come through if it's something you actually believe in. I don't think you have to work at it. But I used to believe you had to find your voice. I think what is important is more broader concept of voice or tone. I mean, when you write, say, your website or your marketing materials, you want to be the authority. You want to be like the girl next door, or boy next door, friendly voice. Or do you want to be, so that might be a factor. But I think, I don't think voice is as important, because I get that all the time. If you write my copy, will it sound like me? Well, it probably will. I've had people, when I wasn't even trying, they said, yeah, it sounds just like me. How did you do it? Just by brilliance. And so you do that, yeah. So that's a great question. Any other else? These are good questions. Yeah.
Question. Your examples of like the two guys walking to a bar and two guys starting at the same time. Are those examples of stories or examples of like
a type of story
theme that we should use?
Oh, that's a good question. Those are a specific type of concept story. And that's why I just wanted to do an overview of what it is. But they're an example of a certain type of concept story, because a concept story is something that makes a concept clear. So like the Wall Street Journal story is a classic. The two guys started at the same time, and they did this, and one of them ended up, running the company, one ended up in the mailroom, and what was the difference? They funded the Wall Street Journal. And so they could not explain that any other way of the power of reading the Wall Street Journal. And the fisherman story is more about, if there are no other questions, I can tell you the fisherman story. Are there other questions? No, the fisherman story is like one of my favorites. This guy is a high-powered executive who goes on a vacation to someplace where there's a beach. And he was walking along the beach and sees this fisherman. And he says to the fisherman, well, you're a little tough, you know what you're doing. I can help you. Why don't you, rent out some boats, and you can be big, you can make lots of money. And the guy says, yeah, and then what? Well, then you have money, you can do whatever you wanted, you can do this. And it goes on and says, yeah, then you can do that. And finally, the fisherman says, and then what? And then it's like, well, then you could go and retire to the beach and do nothing all day and catch fish. And it says, it's, and that is a great story because it illustrates the truth, and it's also an aha moment if you've never heard it. Unfortunately, one of the problems with stories is they get retold, so you lose that aha moment. But if the first time I heard it, it was like, wow, that's a great story. So anyway, so that's another example of a concept story. So, and as you can tell, I've done this. This has become my signature presentation until the next time when I start doing my what to say after someone asks you what to say.
One question. Telling the boring profession on the CPA.
Oh, I love to work with you.
And one of the things that my son's a millennial, and one of the things he brought up with, like, what do you do? How are you different? And he basically got somebody to do an animated story.
Oh, that's
Judy's favorite town that she used such and such.
Oh, I'd like to see it. Yeah, but that's exactly what we do.
And it sort of seems the same
Yeah,
concept.
it's exactly.
When he brought it up, I was like,
Yeah.
but I'm boring.
No, I worked with a lawyer who's an immigration lawyer. And one of the things we did was he told me how to meet.
Yeah, because one of the things he's looking at is how do you scale, how do you reach more people. So.
Yeah, well, I keep begging to write a book, but we don't do it. But he has a story about how he could track somebody down to immigrate. And it shows how committed he is, how dedicated. He went to 3 different states, and he found this guy in jail, and he begged the warden to let him have his story and all that. I mean, that really shows that he doesn't have to say, I'm committed. He shares it. And so I love working with people who are boring. Because my favorite was I did one. I went with an inventory control guy, and we said it was like right, no, yeah, and so no, we said it was like we said it was like a Cinderella. We somehow managed to say it was like a Cinderella story. But anyway, that's the thing. I think I'm out of time. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Cathy.
Cool. Adam, can I
let me
get some? Okay.
Okay.
You want to just do a quick sound check on like slide 5 or 6 just to make sure it's coming out.
Wow, there's so many new
Great. Oh man, is that we are live?
I think we're. Why? Maybe we'll just move this over
I mean,
here.
it's just like, it's intuitive for me. And so that's the difficulty is that I look at problems and think that certain things are blindly obvious to me because I have the lens, but I can't explain what's different about how I'm looking at it versus how I used it before I had it without unpacking it. And so that's right now I'm unpacking and checking my own assumptions and seeing like what isn't obvious about what I'm that's where it all was. So yeah, it's still working on it.
Yeah. So is there a way to go about problem solving then? Like, is there okay, now that you understand that there's a different perspective?
Yeah, it's a matter of identifying the complex objects in the problem that you are trying to solve. So for instance, dyslexia is one of those where it's like, okay, well, you have this issue where people can't read because they keep flipping the letters back and forth. How do we solve the problem? So the way we solve it right now is by forcing them to sit and memorize and stare at these letters, stare at these letters, stare at these letters until they get it. And then you get all of these other side effects with it, like all the side effects that I talked about with dyslexia, like my eyes start flashing.
And I'm just going to set that there.
And all right, hey guys, my name is Brent Black. I'm 33 years old. I'm a new Indie Hall member. I always have a hard time explaining what I do.
I like that. Yeah.
Say what?
ASL, I like that.
Yes.
Sex location.
I always have a hard time explaining what I do when I get stuck next to a person on a bus or a plane or a train, and that's always where people are most curious. I don't know why. Maybe they're anxious and need someone to talk to, and then I have to explain what I do. I'm not good at it. I talk too much, quite verbose, and now I've got to do it in 10 minutes. So this is a presentation called My Weird Little Career. So I got a drama degree from the University of Oklahoma in 2006.
Oklahoma.
Yes, it was a drama degree. It's kind of like getting a poetry degree in hell. So I wanted to be a drama teacher. Then as I got towards senior year, I realized I didn't want to be a drama teacher. I wanted to write musicals and have a place to put them on for free. And then I changed my mind and decided to take out a ridiculous student loan and go to NYU for the only master's program in the world for musical theater writing, which is kind of like Hogwarts. This is a piece of paper I got there. So it's a pretty expensive piece of paper, not worth a whole lot. You kind of got to do stuff with it. That's how arts master's degrees work, as I'm sure some of you know. So I wrote a musical in grad school called I'll Be Damned. I wanted to write a Broadway show. We had an off-Broadway run in 2010. It flopped. Here are some choices. This is my favorite, unsalvageable. And you know, Ben Brantley of the New York Times actually was pretty nice with his pen. He's like really good at being nice about a thumbs down. But there were no two words. Here's why he gets paid the big bucks. There were no two words in a row we could lift that we could just say like raves, Ben Brantley. Like he's really good at knowing you're gonna pull those two. So we could have pulled like the, you know, it would have worked. But so that was a bummer. But while I had been working on the musical, I'd also been making these silly YouTube videos under a handle called Rental Floss. The series that took off was called the With Lyrics series. I still look like this. This is just makeup. But yeah, that was about 10 years ago I started that. And as my Broadway dream kind of wilted, this YouTube thing became my full-time job. And I was suddenly living full-time off of making nerdy comedy music videos like this one. We'll see how the audio works for this one. Okay, so clearly this was a mistake. This is a Schoolhouse Rock video. You want to do this? How do I go back? Nope. So it's a Schoolhouse Rock style video about the fact that you should never buy a console at launch. There's a character, I do a really good impression of the Conjunction Junction voice. No, I sure can't do it live. That's not the degree that I got. But maybe eventually. Yeah, I've got some. Anyway, this is a video. You can check out Brental Floss on YouTube if you really are. It's like dental floss, but it starts with Brent. And some of it hasn't aged well. This one's kind of universally non-offensive, but you know, I was trying to be funny in 2008. There's some stuff I'd go back and change now. Anyway, yeah, it doesn't sound like that as far as I think. However,
candidates, they'll say anything to get your vote. The way game companies just want you to buy their console.
Didn't you want a new Wii U?
More like PU.
PS4?
Oh, give me more.
Xbox One?
Xbox done. What? The OS will be a mess, so you gotta be stone scared. Don't ever buy a console at launch. Now sing it with me. Do not ever buy a console at launch. That's right, and even if they release a picture perfect device, you know that 6 to 12 months later they'll be dropping the price. Ain't that some crap? It's a trap, so you got to be stone shy. Don't ever buy a console at launch or Apple product, but don't ever, never, never buy a modern gaming console at launch. Don't try it, don't do buy that console at launch. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for making that work. So yeah, that was for YouTube Geek Week in 2013. So I had to make it a little more family friendly than some of my other stuff. How am I doing on time? Great. Okay. So I did that for years. I was taking video game tunes that people remembered from their childhoods, adding lyrics kind of like Weird Al, but bald. And I kind of got burnt out on that around 2014. And I was starting to realize people didn't really want my interpretations of their favorite video game tunes as much as they just wanted to re-experience the nostalgia of their favorite game. So I started wanting to make a game so I could like graduate to a higher level of making stuff, kind of being the source of the thing instead of the one commenting on it. So by early 2015, I had formed an idea called Use Your Word. It's a comedy party game, it's a digital comedy party game. I was also pretty broke because living in New York City is not great for savings accounts. And so I basically put all my stuff in storage and stayed with my buddy in Canada, and together we made a game called Use Your Words, which we kickstarted in 2016 and which shipped last spring. Here's a quick trailer for that question mark. Oh wait, no, here we go. Let's try it.
Rated M for mature. Everyone's favorite new party game is coming to Nintendo Switch. Use a phone or a tablet as your controller. Fill in the blank with the funniest thing you can think of. You can even write your own subtitle or a funny clip. Customize your game night with family mode, let's play mode, and spectator mode. It's hysterical fun for any group, whether you're squeaky clean or straight up filthy. Bring home the party game everybody's talking about. It's Use Your Word, the party game for funny people and their unfunny friends. Coming soon to Nintendo Switch.
All right, so around the time I started working on the game, I was asked by an old roommate if I wanted to do a news and politics podcast. I super did not. I've never wanted to do weekly required content because I'm not great at deadlines, even though I need them. But this particular roommate was starting to get really famous. I don't know if you've heard of the McElroy brothers who do The Adventure Zone and My Brother and Me. So Travis was my old roommate and asked me to do a news and politics show with him called Trends Like These. I wasn't exactly kicking and screaming, but like the way I figured it, he was like friends with Lin-Manuel Miranda. So like looping it back around to musical theater, I was like, this is worth trying out. And then like months after we started, an orange man you may have heard of started running for president, and suddenly news and politics were a pretty hot thing to be doing as the weekly podcast, little did we know. And that kind of, in a very Faustian, terrible way, kind of made it a thing. Not just that, but largely that. It's called Trends Like These. This is just a quick clip of how the intro sounds on a typical week.
This week, Trump won't stop tweeting, Cyber Monday succeeding, and tax bill needs defeating. I'm Brent Black. I'm Travis McElroy. And I'm Johnny Come Home Lately. With trends like these. Hello, Brent. Travis, it feels like it has been.
Okay, so that's still ongoing, and all the other things are still technically ongoing. A lot of my job is just maintaining them, the boring part of administrating a YouTube channel that's 10 years old, a video game that's now shipped, but like they're slowly updating. But 2018 for me, I want to get back to my musical theater roots, and I'm working on a Star Trek parody musical. This is not an official image from it. This is a Google Images thing I found. But the concept, I wanted to make it a parody show, but I also wanted it to be in canon. So this is the elevator pitch for that. I don't have a title for it. Good God, if you have a good idea for the title for it, please tell me, because I need to be your friend. The idea is Data from The Next Generation has written a musical in his like theater nerd phase where he's trying to understand humans by acting and being in plays. He's written a musical about the Wrath of Khan. It's bad, but he's written it on the holodeck using like kind of like, think of it as Unity assets. Like he's just using basic assets, so the cast wouldn't all have to. Well, the point is that imagine Data's using prefabricated humanoid holograms. So like the cast wouldn't have to all conform to the very guy-heavy, very race and look-specific cast of Star Trek. Like if Sulu is like not an Asian man, that's okay. Like it doesn't matter because Data doesn't know the difference, so it's easier to cast. But also, Data's showing Picard his first draft of the Wrath of Khan musical on the holodeck. It's bad. It starts out very all over the place and clunky, and so it's a Picard Data episode surrounding a parody musical of Wrath of Khan, where at first it's all over the place. Then they get it kind of working, but it's super cheesy. And by the end, it's kind of emotionally honest and not terrible. And then, like, you know, end with a big cheesy number that was like Data's first draft of that. And maybe get Picard singing somewhere along the way. I don't know how yet. It doesn't have a title. I'm 3 songs in. If you see me working in Indie Hall, I may just be writing some lyrics or even obnoxiously using a little MIDI controller to write some music for it. So you might hear me humming a tune, yeah, for sure. It might be from that. And I may be trying to get a reading of that going in the neighborhood in the next year or so. So that's my weird little career. Thanks for listening.
Where the hell do you go from here? You have a podcast on an extremely well-known network, and you can leverage that. I mean, you could write a musical and send it to them, make them all.
I could. I wouldn't, but I could.
But you could.
I could. Like I literally could, but it would have to be. It'd have to be like the one time you pull that lever because it breaks off, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's a parody show for me. Like I started out wanting to write parody stuff like Spam-A-Lot and a lot of the like. There's a Friends parody musical running off Broadway right now. There's a Silence of the Lambs parody musical. But grad school kind of made me feel like that wasn't good. That wasn't like enough. And weirdly, like I went to YouTube, which is all parody music and lyrics, and now I've come way back around almost 10 years later to wanting to do a comedy parody musical, and I kind of feel like that's what I'm good at, despite having wanted to do more serious stuff. So, but yeah, where do I go from here? I think just back to the stage, trying that out and moving from tiny YouTube screen back to like physical humans in a real space. I hope.
Are you familiar with the Roddenberries?
As in Gene?
Roddenberries is a Star Trek band in Philadelphia.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's a cool
No,
band.
I need to write this down.
Only do Star Trek. I mean, right, it's like Philadelphia. Did they play the Trocadero and the TLA?
Yeah. Is it IES or YS? I'll Google
IES?
it.
I don't know.
I'll Google it. That's cool. Cool. Really?
That's amazing. If Data knew about the Roddenberries, then you could use them for his band.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth between whether or not Data plays Kirk, because I think that would make it very specific, but also like maybe kind of dilute it. I don't know. Data looks creepy. So So I don't know if he's like being funny. I don't know if he. Anyway. Oh yeah, I should have said. Sorry, Data's the android. He's always trying to figure out how humans work, and this is part of his quest to do that. Is writing a musical about his predecessors that he starts with.
When it comes time to put this thing up, I have a lot of friends that would just shit over this.
Thanks. That's what I'm hoping too. And then they can clean themselves up. Watch the shit. The thing is, I like the concept a lot. It's hard to write though, because like it's doing two things at once, and it needs, and also like it's super illegal. Probably I'll get sued, but I want to put it up and get a video of it before Paramount knows about it, just so I have it. Even if it just became a cult thing that was free, just because like if I ask them, they'll be like, no, we want to make crappy stuff like Discovery, and it's like, anyway.
You could go the route of Sonic Mania, where they just give you a job.
Oh, see, that's the thing. I want to like complete it and like roll the dice, hoping that like I'll land on. They go, you know what? Let's just license this and cut you out of it, but produce it. That's like the best case scenario. It won't happen, but that's the best case scenario. So yeah, I may be presenting material from that in the future show and tells.
Yeah. So actually, that leads me to something you and I talked about, which is what are you doing at Indie Ball?
You know, Use Your Words still needs a lot of updates. We just finished a French content pack that needs to be, there's a lot of like asking for things and like continuing to market it on Twitter and making sure the update works. And we're about to ask a lot of like, French randos if the French content is good, because we don't really know. You know, writing the show, probably doing on Thursdays, I'm always doing research for the news podcast, which is a whole day of just turd mining. Because the news is terrible and the world is terrible, and that's what Jon Stewart called it. No, he was like a turd miner, and that's why he stopped doing it. And I totally get it now, like going down all the turd mines and mining some with you mine with a shovel. But that's how you mine in this mine. Cool, thanks guys. Glad to be here.
All about you right now is Shaka Khan when the walls fell. And all of it.
Wrathing the Khan.
Okay, these are titles.
Yeah.
Okay. One more time.
Have you heard of Cathy? Shaka Khan when the walls fell, and all of that cute.
Yeah. No, I mean, like this is like the hardest thing about titling the show is it's so many. It's hard to sum up, but if you think of something, and what you said,
Wrathing the Khan.
Wrathing the Khan.
Are you trying to Hamilton?
It's a horrible.
Not yet.
Hamilton 2?
It'll never work. No musical called Hamilton will ever amount to anything. Hamiltrek. Now see, I mean, I want Data to like refer to Hamilton in some of the material, like clearly be doing like there needs to be a debate, like a freestyle debate. But it's like Data trying to do it, so it's like clunky, but like funny clunky.
He's doing it as Kurt. He's all those weird pauses.
That's the thing. I don't know. Thoughts on it? I think
because it's Data, so they're going to be so precisely timed that they just come across as incredibly still.
Right. And in between scenes, he goes back to robot. It's really weird to see him just go from like Kirk to like I don't know.
What if you call it Brent? We use the typeface from Brent.
I feel like that needs to be my one-man show when I'm like 70. And the only people that come see it still get the joke.